That works, I think. Here we go. Let's see if we get this working. Okay, did everybody know where Browns Ferry is? It's about 10.5 miles from here up Highway 51. This, I don't know, people used to always talk to me about, oh, it's east of town, it's west of town, it's north. When you go south offshore and north back to shore, east and west don't make any sense to me. It's supposed to be east offshore and west back. So, that is the, let me see here. That's the Georgetown side. This is the Hemingway side. The Browns Ferry vessel was right off the end of that little paved road at the park that I think is closed now at Browns Ferry. Of course, the biggest mistake we've made on this whole wreck is we called it the Browns Ferry vessel. It's not a ferry vessel. It was just a river coastal trader that happened to sink at Browns Ferry, and the dumb butts that worked on it called it the Browns Ferry vessel. There are two ferries just to the left. Before you get to the bridge, there are two old ferries sunk right there. Hampton Shuping, this guy here, Hampton found the Browns Ferry boat about 1971. And he told the state about it, told us about the things that he found. He found some really awesome stuff. This is called a Davis quadrant or a backstaff. You put your back to the sun, and it had one other arm right up in here, and you could figure out where you were. It was built, this idea came about mid 1600s, so this was really early. And they found a bunch of bottles. Maybe. There you go. Whoops. They found a bunch of bottles. Bottles are like 1730 to 1740, so this is a really early boat. And the state got interested in it. I was working for the state, and the state underwater archaeologist was Alan Albright, the tall guy there, and that short thing with the dark hair, long and shaggy. Oh man, I was a kid, wasn't I? Good Lord. Well, anyway, we came down and looked at it, and that's what the boat looked like. It probably just came in there for the night. It came from a plantation. It was hauling bricks. Bricks were a byproduct of the plantation era. They couldn't grow rice or indigo or cotton year round. So they had to do something else. And you had Georgetown, Charleston, Wilmington, all looking for bricks to build homes. So bricking was, almost every plantation you go to has got a brick kiln somewhere on it. And this was the cargo of the Browns Ferry vessel. And as you can see, we had really good visibility. And I think if you look really hard, you can see a brick right there. But that's kind of what it looked like. We did some underwater video. We got a sewer camera that we borrowed from a guy that used to walk its way down. So I'm down there holding this sewer camera trying to take video. Forgot about that till I talked right there. With low budget, underwater archaeology in South Carolina was not very well funded at that time, and I doubt it is now. But we had a truck, and we borrowed some air compressors, I think, from the Air Force, and we set up down there, and we started to work on the boat. And we used surface supply. We had two, they're called KMB-10s, these masts that you could go underwater and stay forever, because this was shallow. And I have tendency to get air infections, so I'd go down at breakfast and come up at lunch, and go back down after lunch and come up at knockoff. And it was a good job. And you can see we had a third guy from the state. We had Alan Albright, who was the underwater archaeologist, me, who was the gopher, and this guy here, Mark Newell. Mark Newell, I got two of those guys. This was Newell Wright. I apologize. This was Newell Wright, good guy. And he had a field school. So we had some students taking underwater archaeology course for college. We had volunteers that worked with us, and we had just 3 people from the university. The other thing that's really cool is you see this guy in the blue cap right back here? His name is Charlie Whitaker. Charlie lived in Johanna. And we're here diving on this wreck and getting a little bit of publicity about we're salvaging this wreck. And Charlie comes up and he says, "Hey, I hear you all diving on this wreck." And I said, "Yeah." So I used to be a diver. Of course, he got a beer in his hand. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. And we said, well, you know, we don't need any more divers, Charlie. He said, nah, I've done all the diving I want to do. Just wanted to come over here and help y'all. So he came every day with the beer in his hand and helped us. And actually later on, we got the explosive ordnance people from Charleston to come up and give us some ideas on how to raise it. And they got out of the car and saw Charlie and said, why the hell do you call us? He taught us everything we know. And so he was a real guy. And he knew more about what was going on with that wreck from being on the surface than we did from being underwater. This was one of the students, and I'm sorry, but to go back to that part as best I remember, I don't remember. And we had this guy, I think, was from the radio station in Georgetown. Anybody may or may not remember him.
Jim Rollins?
Something like that, I think, yeah. And he came up, we had some volunteers, and we had the students, and you were right there, working on the wreck. What it had was a load of bricks. Good Lord, a load of bricks. I think we recovered 12,000 bricks. We recovered 12,000 bricks in a milk crate. And what you do is we had somebody on the surface and a line that went to the milk crate. The milk crate had a little bitty lift bag on it, and the diver would take it out, take it to the bottom, and I can't remember whether you could put 12 or 16 bricks in a milk crate. But then you blew up the lift bag and it came to the surface. The diver held on to it. The guy on the surface pulled him in, and if there was a snake anywhere, what you had coming in was the snake, the diver, the lift bag, the bricks, and the line. And we looked at every brick, and they were some really unique bricks. So about the three that I remember the most, one was a complete handprint. And you know, you make these bricks and they're soft, and then they're fired and they become hard. So when they're soft, you can do these kind of things to them. And this guy grabbed it, and it had, you could have done fingerprints on that guy from the top and the bottom. The ones I liked the most was this perfect dog print. I mean, you could see where this dog got on that thing. And the other one is this dog print getting it up. I mean, it's just a blurry thing. And you know that guy is heaving a brick going, get off my bricks. So this is kind of what it looked like. Every day we'd stack these bricks up on that little paved area. And every now and then, the prison farm would come down and get them and store them at the old prison farm there on 51. And so, like I said, we looked at every brick. We brought up 12,000. It was roughly 25 tons of bricks. And this is the frame that has caused a lot of problems. And I know you call these ribs, but the guy that really taught me how to do boat construction said if you're talking ribs, you're talking barbecue. So this is frames, okay? And that's a concave frame, and that's the kind of thing that makes a transom stern that's like on that boat over there. So that's kind of Brown's, that part. We found a lot of really interesting artifacts, just a shoe bottom. Found a couple of millstones. These are kind of neat. They're, I don't know, about that big. I mean, they weren't those massive ones you see sometimes. These are just, you know, hooks for unloading cargo, a little boom. This is a bale seal. And we had, this is a lead bale seal. You know, you tie your ropes around whatever you had, and you crimp this lead bale seal to it. And if the bale seal was gone or the lines were cut, then somebody messed with your shipping product. And we also had a wax bale seal. And then you just drop wax like on a letter, and then you punch that. And we found that on here as well. A number of cooking pots, and one part of the keelson, which is the board that runs down inside the boat, down the center for strength. One end of that had a lot of little chopping on it, where they had made some kind of fire and just chopped up kindling with a little hatchet or an axe. Delft bowl was put back together. I like this, one more and then. I'm a rum drinker, so I understand what that means. I'm not sure if the rest of you know, whatever you drink, you can say one more cup of tea or one more anything, but one more and then. Wish I knew what the rest of it was. It's kind of cool. So once we unloaded the cargo, we unloaded the bricks, we got all the stuff out of the way. This was laying on the river bank. The way it works is you have land up here, dry land, then you have a slope down to the bottom of the river, then you have the bottom of the river. So this thing was laying on the slope and on the bottom. And so the weight of the bricks on the riverside had broken off almost the whole side of the boat. So that had to be removed. It couldn't be lifted. And basically you're looking at, I think, the bow and the stern. And every time I've ever worked on wrecks, you want to know which one is the bow and which one is the stern. It always ends up the stern bow and the bow stern because they change names as you work on them more to what they really are. So we removed all that. We were down to, this is the part that could be lifted. We jetted cargo straps from the Air Force that we borrowed under the boat, and then international paper got involved. Right, it is international paper, right? It got involved. And for the life of me, Bill is the only part of a name I have. But Bill was really helpful in doing all of this. They made the frame out of railroad iron that they had laying around to mill. Now, if you've ever seen pictures of recovery of the Browns Ferry vessel, they have this massive frame. I mean, it is government at work. More money than you know what to do with in this frame. And the guy shows me the plans for it. The first time they've decided how they're going to do it, they got the plans. He shows them to me, and I said, well, yeah, that'll work, no problem. That's just like we raised the Browns Ferry boat. He said, well, what do you mean? I didn't steal your plans. And this ours was a little old bitty frame. They also completely reworked the crane and drove it out there so we'd have something to lift with. International Paper was a good people in our project. We put some pads down. We drove the crane out. Here you got Newell Wright. Here you got Charlie Whitaker. A lot of people standing around. In fact, that day the police said we had 6,000 people on the bank. It was the largest single grouping of people for a non-sporting event in Georgetown history. Both sides of the river, boats. It's really interesting. At one point they're all singing, "Shall We Gather by the River?" It was really cool. And you can see the frame in the water. Now, the boat, the way the boat was laying, if you look back and remember those pictures, the boat was twisted on one end and flat on the other. And somewhere I read that some great philosopher said, you know, things are done by two kinds of people. Those that are smart enough to know how to do it, and those that are too dumb to know it can't be done. So I think we fell into the latter category. But what we did was we took that frame, and you can see it's just a little railroad iron frame, not much, and we twisted it just like the boat would come along. So it was flat on one end, it was all twisted on the other. We set it down on the boat, strapped it up, picked the boat up off the bottom, and came off of all of these come-alongs. And when we did, the boat just untwisted. And I mean, anybody thought that was the most amazing thing in the world, and we just thought that was the way it was supposed to work, you know. There's that handsome kid again. And Alan Albright. We were using scuba when we raised it. And here it is coming up. Now, the crane operator, and again, I'm sorry, but I don't remember his name, but he came in and he was a hot dog. He'd drop that headache ball they had all over the place. He'd grab those pads, jerk them here and jerk them there. I said, whoa, man, you're trying to raise this really old 1730 shipwreck. I said, imagine it's a truckload of eggs. Can you raise it and not break an egg? And he said, well, I don't know. I can do some pretty strange things under pressure. So the pressure I'm showing you is right here. And if you look, I think there's some pictures upstairs. If you look right there, and it's really hard to see from where you're sitting, but there's an old Milwaukee can. Somebody got me a beer out there. I drank it and set it on the frame. Now the boat has come out of the water. These pictures went international. I saw them in Germany and everywhere else. This was a really big deal when this boat came out. Again, here it is coming in. There's the old Milwaukee can. So this guy's doing a good job so far, right? And then it comes, so what it did was we were going to put it on a flatbed truck. But the boat is flat, but you have to put legs on it. So it's some International Paper had a welder out there for us, It was an electric welder. We're keeping the boat wet. Every time he'd try to weld, it'd knock him down the street a little bit, you know. And he finally said, man, y'all got to give me a break here. So again, he sits it down, but there's the old Milwaukee can again. So I'm telling you, this guy could not break an egg in a truck, I think. So we, hold on, I'm sorry. Brought it into Georgetown. I used to say that was probably about my right leg now. That's me back there. It sat on Front Street for a while, and I forget how long. We had sprinklers on it. People could ride by and look at it. It doesn't look like much. If you don't know what you're looking at, it really doesn't look like much. But it is the most, how do you say that? Most intact colonial vessel ever recovered in North America. And if you really look, you'll see how the sides are really parallel. It was just a tractor trailer truck of its day. And the ends come in real quick, carry a lot of weight, 25 tons. And it just went from plantations to Georgetown, maybe go offshore. It had Torita worm damage, and it had that Davis quadrant. So it probably went off, went around Bulls Bay, went around going into Wilmington. So it did Charleston, just made probably little runs, probably had a crew of a couple, you know. So that's kind of the raising. That's most of what I had to do with. I had some other things to do. I hope I'm not going too long yet. Okay. So this is just going to be a quick the rest of the life. Now you figure this boat went from plantations to Georgetown, from plantations to Charleston, things like that. I think it's probably traveled more in its life after we recovered it than it ever did in its life. First thing we had to do was take it from Georgetown on that flatbed truck to Sumter, South Carolina. Now I'm the flunky, so I'm the guy riding the truck. So me and the truck driver are driving this thing to Sumter, South Carolina. And I'm stopping at every little gas station I see and saying, excuse me, but can I borrow your water hose for just a minute? You know, I got to keep this thing wet, you know. And then they realize they'd just seen it on the news or something, and then people start showing up, so we got to go with that. So we get wet some more. It goes to Sumter to a pond. And while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do in conservation, we put it in this pond. It stayed there for a while. And we brought it up. And you can see the straps. You can actually even see the legs that were welded on it. We did a little bit different when we recovered it. We took it to Fort Jackson. So it went from Georgetown to Sumter, from Sumter to Fort Jackson. It sat on the bottom in Fort Jackson. We put these boards underneath it so that the straps didn't dig into the boat at all. The really cool thing, and the thing that people don't think much about, is you have to have a spreader to bring something up. If you go from a point here and it's got any weight, and it goes down, goes around, and when you pick it up, it tries to become straight again. So it'll cut into it. But if you use a spreader, then the pressure is just straight up. So here it is at Fort Jackson, and it stayed there for a while. We built it, we got a grant, we built a facility, we bought $250,000 worth of polyethylene glycol. That's what you conserve these boats with. And we put it in this big tank. For one night, it was the biggest hot tub you ever saw. I mean, me and the conservator, we had a great time. I mean, we'd jump in there, drink beer, jump in, drink beer, jump in. One time we ran out of beer, so we went to get some more, and we came back, went to jump in, it was about 112. And he said, I saw you jump in and you just stood there. He said, I thought something was wrong. So we got it in the tank, and it supposedly got conserved. I question that. Polyethylene glycol is, we had $250,000 worth of polyethylene glycol. It is something like 96-97% recoverable and used again. This facility, our idea of it when we built it, was to last forever and conserve wooden artifacts from all over the country. It has since been torn down. And the polyethylene glycol was flushed down the sewer system in Columbia. So gone. But it came out, and you can see how flat bottomed it was. Just 3 boards make the bottom. And so it could beach to unload. It It was a, you know, just a right personable little tractor trailer truck. It got conserved more or less in Columbia. It came to the Rice Museum. They took the roof off the Rice Museum, put it in there. Some guys who honestly didn't really know what they were doing, I think tried to rebuild it as best they could and probably did a half decent job. And you know, we're all long gone. I left in '84. My boss left probably a year or two after that. So there was really nobody at the end that knew anything about Browns Ferry. Hopefully maybe one day it'll be here, because this is where it deserves to be. And so while it's kind of the end of what I got to say, I went to look and see what I had. Well, it turned out I had 4 books in my house that all mention and talk about Browns Ferry. Tidecraft by Rusty Fleetwood down in Savannah. Those 4 books right there. Then I looked and there were a number of articles, one in the International Journal of Nautical Archaeology and Underwater Exploration, another British journal on underwater archaeology, a couple of University of South Carolina publications called the Notebook Series. And of course, there is the greatest, don't forget, can be bought on your way out. Wooden ships, and the man is here who might autograph it for you. So, a good deal. And it's written up in there too. And if you have any questions and I have a minute, I'll answer it. If I don't have a minute, catch me later.
But I'm here to talk about my painting. Many years ago, I was a younger artist. And Virginia Skinner, do y'all remember Virginia? A nice, wonderful lady. Anyway, her land out in the area, she wanted me to do a historical painting for her home. So we went out there, and it was around June, mid-June. So we went out there, and I took a sketch pad. Well, there's nothing but leaves. It was so thick, I couldn't see anything. There was leaves in my face. And she started explaining about the river, how they dug the channel, the flat boat to take the bricks out to the boat, the horses that would turn and churn the bricks, the heating and the digging of the clay. And I didn't see anything but just leaves. So anyway, we stood and we had a picnic lunch, and she explained what all happened. So on the back of letterheads, I started doing rough sketches, drawings of what she was telling me. So from that, I created the painting. And she had a limited time to do it, so I tried to get in 2 or 3 days, finish the painting for her to put in her home. So you know, I was a young artist, I could see better then. So anyway, we talked, became really good friends. And to my surprise, I guess I came here about a year ago, and saw the painting in the museum, and I said, "Oh my God, it's in the museum!" I was really thankful but shocked. But and I found out then the bricks they dug up. It's amazing, the story of the bricks. And I think there's a purchase of each person's name on it they bought. And it was just a great honor to have a painting in this museum. And I've donated a lot of different things through the years to the Maritime Museum. And this painting, particular one, this was the first painting that got everything started. When I was, I forgot what year it was, before 2000, they asked me would I paint something that would sell in print. So this is the original. And I did a painting of Goat Island when they only had 2 little boats pushed up, and so I added the goats. And anyway, it was so successful, we put it into limited edition prints, small, medium prints, and limited edition. We did t-shirts. Well, I was signing them out that day during the Wooden Boat Show, the early ones, and we sold every t-shirt we had. I think we had 3 smalls left, and we sold thousands of them as we did prints, and they raised thousands and thousands of dollars that day. And since then, I think the prints got shuffled around, and you can't find them now. But you can still, I gave the copyright to the museum, so y'all can still print them. You can print them in note cards, small prints, big prints. Because we had potential for raising up to $80,000 easily. So you can certainly use this and make more money, because it was very successful in that day. I mean, I couldn't sign a patent, and Arthur Ravenel came up. He wanted to see the painting, so we had a lot of people that came up to interested in what I was doing. So this was how everything got started, the museum. So this is so it was Lynn Anderson. You remember Lynn Anderson? Well, he said it was just a state of mind back then. So I was sitting at the table with 4 or 5 guys. They said, "We'd like for you to paint Goat Island, be a fundraiser." I said, "Sure." So anyway, we got our heads together. I went out and did a lot of sketching and whatever. And this, from imagination, this I could see. So anyway, I was out there painting and doing whatever. And so we finally finished this acrylic on paper. And it was, like I said, it was very, very, very successful. So if the museum ever decides to use this again, y'all own the copyright. So but it's the very first one issued, so that might be a selling point. This is the very first one. So it's possible, because there's a lot of posters in there, and this one could be a vintage poster, I guess, that would help. Now, that's really all I have to say. I mean, I'm just here, I got to teach a class across the street, so I know there's no questions right now, but mine's not as interesting as this guy. This guy was amazing. But like I said, the painting I just did from imagination, from sketches from on letterheads, envelopes, and after I put it together 3 or 4 days, and I was so flattered to see it at the museum. I was, oh my God. So, but anyway, so that's why I brought this. I wanted to show you how we started, or one of the things to help get started. So this is the original. So anyway, if there's no questions now, I got to go. I mean, I'm not going, but
I know you have a class.
I do have a class.
So since he does have to leave, I know we said to Ralph, we'll take questions. Does anyone have a question?
yeah, because I have to teach a class.
I do. Did you name this painting?
I don't think we did. Virginia, I was sitting at her home that day signing it, but I don't think we named it, honestly. I don't think so.
Do you want to give it a name now?
Well, I guess everybody can vote. Oh, wow.
I think the thing that amazes me is I think one of the first photos, Ralph, that you showed almost had that canal there where you were looking down to where you went to bring the boat up. I thought maybe you had seen something like
No,
that.
no,
Because it looks so much like that.
No, I was sitting it was in a bunch of woods. As a matter of fact, I went out there a week later to try to get some kind of information what I could paint from. And I heard Mr. Dawson had his gun pointed at me. He thought I was, trespassing. So I almost got shot. He didn't realize who I was, and I lived. So, but he said that close, he almost pulled the trigger. So anyway, it's got an interesting history, but it's an honor to show having an original museum. I appreciate that so much. And Sid liked it so much, he keeps it in the river room, but it's y'all's. It's here.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, in 2014, Robert McAllister, the then director at the museum, asked me and Ed Scott if we could build a model of the Browns Ferry vessel. Of course, that was quite a challenge, and we took him up on it. And what I'd like to talk about today is some of the things we went to in building that model. We did not have near as many challenges as Ralph went through in raising it. So, okay, next one. Nice. Can you advance it?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's up.
The second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Building the Browns Ferry vessel model? Which model?
Which model? Yes. The first thing we had to decide is which model to build. There was at that time 2 schools of thought on what the hull looked like. So we had to make a choice there. Then I want to go through the steps that we took in building the model, and then finish up with rigging the model. Go to the next one.
Okay.
I can't, okay, I don't know when you go. J. Richard Steffi in 1979 made a preliminary survey of the Browns Ferry vessel, and determined that it was pointed at both ends. It was double-ended, if you will. Steffi was, in those days, the go-to guy if you had a historical shipwreck, and pretty well known. A lot of writings on his part, a couple of books, of course, at least. Then, if you will, next slide.
Okay.
In 1992, Frederick Hocker made another survey of it. And his survey was after it came out of the tank at USC. And he was able to look at it and get around it a little bit more than what Steffi was. Abel. He concluded that the Browns Ferry vessel had a transom on it. And he concluded this based on the whale, to him, was more straight at the stern, and then frame 4 was fuller than it should have been if it was double-ended. So he concluded that it had a transom on it. Ed Scott at that time contacted Hawker by telephone, spoke to him about the transom, and was told that yes, it had a transom. And based on what Hawker told Ed, we concluded that we would build our model with a transom. Now, let me see. I'm still not able to get down to these slides, so I'm going.
Okay. We're on the next one, the caution.
Caution? Okay. The caution, I want you to, on some of these slides, there's photographs, and if you're a type of person that has a nice, neat, orderly workshop or office, they may be offensive to you. But keep in mind, I did clean up afterwards. In building the model, the next slide, we built it upside down. The hull was upside down when we built it. What we used was a billboard that we attached the molds that would form the shape of the hull to, and then we started from there and added the pieces of the hull to it. We added the bottom of it, then we went to planking it, then the floors, the keelson, and the frames, then to the deck, onto the cap rail, and then the rudder, and at that point we were finished with it. On the next slide, what you're looking at there is the billboard with the 6 frames attached to 6 molds attached to it. And you notice they're on there, they're placed at a certain distance along the model hull, so we had that shape at that particular place. The bottom is sort of sitting there where I'm testing it for fit at that point. I think there's, I don't know if you can see them, but there's 2 nails, one in each end of it. And if we go to the next slide, what you see on this one is the hull now is beginning to take shape. There's 1 plank. The first plank has been placed on it. The planks are glued to the stem that you see there in the front at the bow and at the transom. You don't glue them to the molds. If I glued them to the molds, I wouldn't be able to get the hull off later on. I don't intentionally glue them. There was some cases where I had to bang on it pretty good to get it off. So the next slide, this point, I'm up to 3 planks on the hull. If you notice all of the spring clamps at the top, that's what held the planks together while the glue was drying. And in this case, what I was using was plain old Elmer's glue, carpenter's glue. Next one.
All right.
At this point, all of the planks are installed, and it's ready now for sanding. Next one.
Okay.
This one shows the hull after it's been sanded and primed. The first time I looked at it this way, I called it the great white whale. That's what it looked like to me at that point. The next slide.
Okay.
Here, what you're looking at, the floors are installed, the keelson that big piece of wood that's going down the middle is on, the frames are on there. And then there's that side piece of wood with all the clamps on it. That is actually called a clamp. That's why I named the clamps holding it spring clamps, so you wouldn't get confused on there. I was confused myself. But look at the keel saw. The reason we know the boat had 2 masts was in the keel saw there were 2 mast steps, one sort of midship, one at the forward end. And that's how it was determined that the vessel had 2 masts. Next one.
Okay.
On this slide, you're looking at the decks installed, the support for the main mast and the framing. It's all in there. Still some more work to be done, however. Next slide.
Okay.
In this one, everything is installed in it. You see the rudder's in there, all of the frames, the decks are on there, and it's ready to go now for rigging. Now, at this point you might think, we've gone through this pretty fast. How long did it take me? Up to this point, it took approximately 350 hours. Some points in there I got tired of counting and sort of missed a day or two. But it's 350 to 400 hours by the end of it. Next slide.
Okay.
The rigging of the model, you know, we knew it had 2 masts, but we didn't know what the rigging was. But, you know, there was not sufficient evidence of that with the wreck that Ralph and them found. But Steffi made a good case for using the Spirit mode of rigging, and that's what we went with. We stuck with Steffi. Now the rigging consists of you know, the mast, the spars, 6 1-inch blocks, and that. Down at the bottom, that photograph, that's how I built the blocks for it. Keep in mind this boat is 50 inches long. The scale is 1 inch equals 1 foot. Not very many commercial model blocks out there that were 1 inch. So I had to hand make them. Actually, I had to hand make all of these. And if you look at the block, it does have a roller in it, like a block would have, so that the rope would go through it. You can see in the next to the last photograph of the block, there's a pin that goes through it. Next one. This is what the rigging looks like on the model. The black rigging, the strings you see in black, that's the standing rigging. That holds up the mast, the fore and the main mast. It supports those masts, keeps them upright. The other rigging is called the running rigging, and that's used to raise and lower the sails, guide the sails so you can determine which way you want to go in that. That was the next slide. The last thing to be rigged was the anchors. And I don't believe there were anchors found, but I think there was the windlass, the little piece there that brings up the anchors. I think that was found. That's why we put anchors on it. Those 2 anchors on the model are not made out of metal. They're made out of wood and then painted to resemble metal. And that is my fast and dirty how I built the Browns Ferry vessel model. Next slide.
All right.
Thank you for listening. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it.